The reflection in the Gomolhar house. The dust motes danced in the lone shaft of sunlight piercing the drawn curtains of the old bungalow. The first hint of something amiss wasn't a grand, terrifying spectacle, but a subtle shift in the everyday. It began with the dust. It started subtly, as these things always do, like a barely perceptible tremor in the familiar melody of his task. He was meticulous, had spent hours cleaning, dusting, wiping down every surface in the master bedroom. Yet every morning, a fine, almost imperceptible layer of dust would reappear on the surface of the large mirror. Not elsewhere in the room, just on the mirror. He'd wipe it again, baffled, blaming the old house's drafts, or perhaps the dust-laden air of the Karnataka summer. But it always returned, a ghostly film over the glass. Then came the cold spots. Patches of air in the master bedroom that would suddenly drop several degrees, chilling him to the bone, even in the humid Chikamagaluru afternoons. The hairs on his arms would prickle, a sensation that made him glance around nervously. He'd check the windows, the heavy wooden door, all sealed. He blamed faulty ventilation, a quirk of the ancient bungalow. But an unsettling sense of an unseen presence began to take root, a feeling of being watched, a pervasive, cold gaze emanating from the very surface of the mirror, even when it was covered. The first truly unsettling incident involved his belongings. He'd left his watch on the bedside table, beside his phone. The next morning, it was gone. He searched frantically, tearing apart the room, convinced he'd simply misplaced it. 2 hours later, as he was about to give up, he found it, resting perfectly, inexplicably, on the ornate frame of the mirror nestled among the carvings. He swore he'd never placed it there. He dismissed it as fatigue, the stress of the task, but a small seed of unease was planted. He tried to rationalize it. An old house settling, drafts playing tricks with the air, perhaps even a mouse dragging small objects. But the feeling of being watched, the persistent chill emanating from the mirror, was harder to dismiss. He found himself unconsciously averting his gaze from it, even when covered, as if avoiding an unblinking eye. One afternoon, he was sorting through his grandmother's old saris in a large wardrobe. He heard it then, a faint, almost subliminal whisper. It was too soft to discern words, but it seemed to emanate from the direction of the mirror, a sighing, mournful sound, like wind through dry leaves, but with an underlying cadence that felt strangely human. He froze, listening intently. Nothing, just the oppressive silence of the house. For Rohan Mehta, a city-bred software engineer who considered Wi-Fi a basic human right, the ancestral home in Chikamagaluru was less a cherished heritage and more a forgotten relic. He developed a strange compulsion to keep the mirror covered. He'd meticulously drape the heavy velvet cloth over it each night, feeling a bizarre sense of relief, as if he were closing an eye that watched him sleep. But sometimes, in the dead of night, he'd wake up with a jolt, convinced he'd seen a sliver of darkness through the heavy fabric, as if the cover had been subtly shifted, exposing a thin, dark line of reflection. He'd scramble out of bed, heart pounding, only to find the velvet perfectly in place. He started tying the cover to the frame, securing it tightly, feeling a desperate, futile need to blind whatever watched him. The anomalies escalated, subtle yet persistent, gnawing at Rohan's rigid, logical framework. The dust on the mirror no longer appeared as a thin film. It coalesced into patterns, swirling spirals, faint, intricate symbols he didn't recognize. Sometimes it looked like the faint outline of a child's handprint, small and delicate. He'd photographed them, trying to make sense of the geometry, the meaning. But the images on his phone always looked like random smudges, nothing conclusive. The whispers grew louder, clearer. They were no longer indistinct murmurs. They were voices. Direct. Personal. Calling out fragmented phrases in a language he didn't understand, but the tone was clear, pleading, despairing, sometimes angry, and occasionally a word or two in perfect accented English: cold, below, lost, find, I. He heard a child's soft sob, a woman's desperate plea, a man's guttural gasp, always seeming to emanate from the depths of the mirror or from the dark corners of the bedroom. He'd pause his work, straining his ears, but they would always fade, replaced by the oppressive silence of the house. He started seeing fleeting shadow figures in the corners of his vision, coalescing for a split second into familiar forms. A small child, a grieving woman, an old man, before dissolving back into the darkness. His own reflection in any polished surface, even the screen of his laptop, seemed to distort, his features twisting into a fleeting grimace, a look of utter despair before normalizing. It was preying on his mind, twisting his thoughts, trying to isolate him further. He developed a slight tremor in his hands, barely noticeable but present. He stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping soundly. His logical mind, his anchor, was slipping. His grandparents, gentle souls who communicated mostly in the soft cadence of Kannada and the universal language of food, had passed away within months of each other, leaving behind a sprawling colonial-era house named, rather poetically, Gulmohar House, Ia, after the flamboyant tree that still showered its scarlet petals onto the driveway. He found himself talking to himself, muttering arguments against an unseen presence, then immediately regretting it, retreating further into himself. The few calls from his parents, asking about the progress of the house, became a source of dread. He couldn't tell them. They would think he was cracking under the pressure, or worse, that he was disrespecting his grandparents' memory with superstitious nonsense. He was truly alone. The entity, whatever it was, knew. It was nurturing his despair, cultivating his isolation. He started researching the bungalow's history more deeply, prompted by a desperate, illogical urge. Gulmohar House. It had been built in the early 1900s by a British coffee planter, a Mr. Alistair Finch, and his wife Clara. The property had passed through several hands before his grandparents bought it in the 1960s. He found an old, faded local newspaper clipping in a forgotten trunk in the attic, detailing a tragic incident from the 1930s. The Finch's only child, a little girl named Lily, had disappeared from the house without a trace. Her parents searched for months, eventually succumbing to grief. The article mentioned a large mirror in the master bedroom, which Mrs. Finch had covered after Lily's disappearance, claiming it showed things that weren't there. The house had gained a reputation as being haunted thereafter, often standing empty for years. A chill ran down Rohan's spine. Lily, the child's handprint, the whispers, his grandmother's cryptic warnings. It was all converging. He looked at the mirror, its velvet shroud now seeming to pulse with an unseen energy. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to tear the cover off, to confront whatever lay beneath, to force it to reveal itself. He felt the desperate need to understand. One particularly humid night, The power in the bungalow flickered and died, plunging the house into absolute darkness. The air grew heavy, thick with the cloying scent of lilies and damp earth. The high-pitched whine he'd associated with the mirror was deafening now, vibrating through the very floorboards, through his teeth, through his bones. The whispers in the master bedroom became a cacophony, a swirling vortex of voices, all of them his, all his anxieties, all his doubts, all the faces he'd lost. And then, from the depths of the hum, a clear, distinct sound, a child's laugh, playful, innocent, yet utterly chilling. Rohan was there for a grim purpose, to clear out the house. His parents, still in Mumbai, had entrusted him with the task, knowing his meticulous nature. He'd envisioned a quick, efficient job, pack valuables, discard junk, sell, followed by that guttural chuckle, now louder, more confident. He stood frozen in the pitch black, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt the cold spots swirling around him, coalescing, forming indistinct shapes. And then, slowly, deliberately, he heard the soft, rustling sound of the heavy velvet cloth being pulled away from the mirror. A faint, unearthly blue light began to emanate from the surface of the glass, illuminating the room in an ethereal glow. Rohan stumbled backward, gasping, but his eyes were drawn, transfixed, to the mirror. It was no longer reflecting the empty room. Within its depths, a scene was unfolding, not a reflection, but a window into something else. He saw the old master bedroom, bathed in a flickering yellowish light like candlelight. A small, ethereal figure stood in the center of the room, a young girl dressed in a faded, old-fashioned white dress. Lily. She was looking into the mirror, her head tilted, a look of profound curiosity on her face. And then, behind her, in the mirror's reflection, something else began to coalesce. A shimmering distortion like heat haze forming a vague bipedal figure, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its head too small. Its skin seemed to ripple like water under moonlight. And its face, it was a shifting mosaic of shadows and light, features coalescing and dissolving, but he saw the eyes. Not eyes, but two swirling vortices of darkest black, reflecting the dim glow of the scene with an unnatural, hungry gleam. The creature reached out, its impossibly long, slender fingers hovering over Lily's shoulder. She turned, her small face filled with wonder, no fear. And then, the creature in the mirror seemed to unhinge its jaw, wider than any human mouth could open, revealing not teeth, but a pulsating, internal luminescence, a faint, unearthly blue light that pulsed in rhythm with the hum. It was beautiful in a terrifying alien way. It was the abyss personified. The voices in Rohan's mind coalesced, a chorus now, 1,000 alien thoughts, 1,000,000 human fears, all merging, all vying for dominance. He hadn't factored in the sheer weight of memories or the pervasive stillness that clung to every object like fine dust. He certainly hadn't factored in the mirror. He prided himself on his pragmatism. He dealt in algorithms, in logical sequences. She wanted to play. We offered peace, understanding, freedom. He watched in horror as the creature in the mirror seemed to inhale, a subtle, sucking motion. Lily's small figure in the reflection wavered, her outlines shimmering, before she slowly, inexorably, began to drift into the mirror, her form becoming translucent, merging with the swirling darkness of the creature's mouth. She didn't struggle. She simply dissolved, a look of placid curiosity on her face. Then the reflection of the room was empty. The shimmering creature was gone. The light from the mirror pulsed, then intensified, becoming a blinding, invasive blue that seemed to burrow into Rohan's very being. He felt cold, so cold. And then, a tearing sensation, not physical but profound, as if something was being gently, meticulously peeled from his core. He heard his own scream, distant, muffled, then fading into the terrifying alien hum. He woke up, slumped on the floor of the master bedroom, the pre-dawn light painting the sky with bruised purples and oranges through the uncovered window. The air was frigid, the hum was gone. The mirror hung silently on the wall, its vast, dark surface reflecting the empty room. He pushed himself up, his body aching, his mind a shattered mess. The room was still, too still. The power was back on, a faint glow from the hallway. But the silence, it was deeper than before, more profound. He stumbled out of the bedroom, out of the house. He didn't lock the door. He just got into his rental car and drove. No one tried to stop him. No one seemed to notice him go. The Gulmohar tree still showered its scarlet petals onto the driveway, vibrant and indifferent. He never went back to Chickamaugaluru. He sold the bungalow site unseen, taking a significant loss, not caring about the money. The thought of that place, of the vast mirror and what lurked within it, was enough to make his stomach churn. He lives in a small apartment now, in a bustling city, far from old bungalows, far from any profound silence. He avoids reflective surfaces. He rarely looks in mirrors, and when he does, he scrutinizes his own face, half expecting it to distort, to show the void. He leaves the television on, always, a low hum of white noise to drown out the others. He keeps his apartment brightly lit, day and night, a desperate attempt to banish the shadows. Superstition, folklore, the old ways his grandmother had sometimes hinted at, those were charming fables, not the bedrock of reality. He'd seen enough of life's harsh truths to know that real horror lay in human cruelty, not spectral apparitions. He was wrong. He tells himself it was a breakdown, hallucinations, the exhaustion of clearing out his grandparents' house, the burden of grief finally catching up to him. He repeats it like a mantra, a fragile shield against the terrifying truth. He clings to logic, to reason. But the shield is riddled with holes. From that day, he still remains thinking about it. He feels the faint, inexplicable cold spots, even in the warmth of summer. He sometimes catches the cloying sweet scent of lilies and damp earth on a breeze, or in the stillness of the night. He hears faint whispers, just on the edge of hearing, calling his name, promising him oblivion, echoing his deepest regrets, the cries of the lost. He scrutinizes the faces of strangers, the expressions of friends, looking for that subtle distortion, that unnatural stretch of a smile, that emptiness in the eyes, that faint, unblinking intensity in the depths of their gaze. He knows it's still there, within the mirror. And he knows with a horrifying certainty that it carried a piece of him with it, a resonance that was forever altered, forever open to its cold, unblinking gaze. He escaped Gulmohar House, but he did not escape the entity. He is safe, for now, but he is not whole. He is forever haunted by the chilling knowledge that beyond the familiar reflections of our world, ancient, hungry things lie dormant or perhaps actively pursue, waiting for the curious, waiting for the isolated, waiting for the pain, forever ensuring that some absences once experienced can never truly be filled. And he will always wonder what stories it now whispers from the glass, what souls it now assimilates, and if, one day, his own reflection will waver, and the unblinking eye will stare back from the other side, inviting him to join the forgotten. From that day she remained thinking about it, the fear, a constant companion, a shadow that never quite faded. The house was hers, but it no longer felt like home. It felt like a stage, and she was the unwitting actor performing for an audience she couldn't see. The mirror hung in the master bedroom directly opposite the grand four-poster bed. It was enormous, floor to ceiling, encased in a heavy, ornate wooden frame carved with intricate floral patterns that had darkened with age. Its glass was old, slightly warped, giving reflections a subtle, almost imperceptible blur. His grandmother had always kept it covered with a thick velvet cloth, only removing it for special occasions. "Bad luck, child, to see too much of oneself," she'd murmur with a gentle smile, though her eyes always held a distant, unreadable quality when she spoke of it. Rohan, a boy then, had found it quaint. Now, standing alone in the quiet room, it felt less quaint and more watchful. Thanks for watching. The veil between our world and theirs is thinner than you think. Each like, each share, each subscription strengthens the connection. Feed the channel before it feeds on you.